Chers professeurs, chères étudiantes, chers étudiants, honorable assistance, aujourd'hui, l'Institut des sciences politiques, juridiques et sociales a l'honneur et le plaisir d'accueillir parmi nous Madame Stacy Dawson pour une conférence autour de la diplomatie américaine et bien sûr pour partager avec nous son expérience. Et je vous demande de poser des questions, toutes les questions qui vous viennent dans la tête. Nous n'avons pas toujours l'occasion donc de recevoir des personnes qui veulent s'ouvrir sur le monde étudiant et qui veulent écouter les étudiants donc et débattre avec eux sur des sujets donc bien sûr qui sont en relation avec la vie académique. Alors, je vous souhaite la bienvenue. Donc, je vais essayer de parler un peu en anglais. Madame Stacy, elle parle en anglais, bien sûr, en arabe, Darija pour les Marocains, si vous veulent poser des questions en Darija, et puis un peu en français, n'est-ce pas? Alors, the Institute of Legal and Social Political Science, the ISPJS, has the honor and pleasure of receiving Madame Miss Stacy Dawson for a conference on American diplomacy and her experience in this field. Excusez mon anglais. Bah, c'est ça. Je vais. Stacy Rab Dawson is Foreign Service Officer with the USA Department of State, currently serving as Deputy Director of DAR America, an American cultural center and seat of the Public Affairs section of the U.S. Consulate General Casablanca. Miss Stacy joined the State Department in 2014 and has previously served Mexico City, Jerusalem, and Washington, D.C. Prior to government service, she worked as a language and cultural assistant in Spain and Jordan throughout the Spanish government and Fulbright program, respectively. She holds a Master in International Relations and International Economics from Johns Hopkins and a Bachelor in Anthropology and Music, yes, from the University of Virginia. She is joined in Morocco by her spouse and 2 children. Once again, thank you, Mrs. Stacy, for enlightening us on your professional experience in the world of diplomacy and American diplomacy in. Je souhaite aussi la bienvenue à notre invité, donc M. Jawad Mniani, qui est donc directeur management, programme de directeur management à DAR America au département donc US Department of State. Et merci pour votre présence. Je donne la parole à Madame Stacy pour nous partager avec nous son expérience sur le...
Bonjour à tous. Bon. Bon, c'est bon. Non, c'est bon. Je parle un petit peu de français, mais je préfère parler en anglais, donc je vais essayer de parler lentement en anglais. S'il y a des choses qui n'est pas entendues, no, entendu is to hear, right? Comprendre, there you go. So, as my colleague said, my name is Stacy Dawson. I'm a diplomat with the U.S. Department of State. I've been an American diplomat for about 8 years. I've been to Mexico, Jerusalem. I'm now here in Morocco. And cet été, I'm going to Alger. I'm going to Algeria. So I want to, like many Americans, not to speak at you. I don't want to just talk, 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 and you listen, 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 listen. Je préfère la conversation. C'est meilleur. Parce que je peux parler beaucoup sur, I don't know, something. Je pense que c'est le plus important, le plus intéressant, et vous êtes like, this is not at all exciting to me. So, instead of me talking about what I think is important, je préfère commencer avec des questions. So I don't know if it's meilleur if I sit, if I stand. I like this because I can see you all better. So I think what I'll do is I'll just slide over here like this to be not behind and just go directement de la question. I want to know where you're from, what you think is interesting. En français, en anglais, en arabe, يعني ماشي مشكل. Go. Let's go. Okay, I saw you first and then you. Go ahead. Should I bring it up? Or maybe this one.
Hi everyone, my name is Omar Qabbaj. I am a student of second year in law and I'm from Morocco, Casablanca, and I never visit America, but it's a dream for me, of course, what we saw in cinema and Hollywood and a lot of things about America. So my question is possible the American dream for Morocco students?
So, yes. No, so you want more? I think, but maybe we step back and we talk about what is the American dream, right? And I like that you asked for education because I think l'idée, right? The idea of the American dream is l'opportunité. Anybody can succeed in their background. Doesn't matter if you're a poor student, if you're very, very rich, that there are opportunities for growth, opportunities for advancement for your families. Pratiquement, right, you can study in the United States. And DAR America, and also with our colleagues at Education USA, we're here as a resource to help you find programs to study in the United States. And maybe I'll take this moment to explain a little bit about the process of how you could study in the United States. And then at the end, we can give you the contact for Education USA if you have more questions. So in order to study in the United States, the very first thing you must do is to research and find an appropriate program. It does not mean that you need to speak English. There are many, many programs that will teach you to speak English before you finish the degree. But I think many people think, ooh, I have to get my visa, I have to get my visa, I have to get my visa. No. First, you find a program, then you apply, get into the program, and only then do you go and look for the visa. And I think there's a lot of stress around the visa process, but as long as you are a legitimate student and you can pay for the program that you found, scholarships, sponsors, etc., then the visa process is really it's just the period at the end of the sentence. So I think there are many opportunities. Le problème, right, the difficulté is that the system in the United States is decentralized, meaning that you can't go to the United States government and say, tell me all of the universities. There's no one repository, there's no one place where every single program and every single university is in. Like you have to Google and you ask your friends and you ask the Education USA advisor. I want to pause. On comprend, Médiane? Yeah? Do I need to speak slower? Okay. Just making sure, because I don't want to talk to people and they're like, so this, yes, I think the opportunity is there. And I know that it can seem overwhelming because there are so many choices and maybe it's expensive or maybe it seems like the process is difficult. So just know that we have resources at DAR America, Education USA, to help you find a program, to one that does English first and then, or to do CELTA, not CELTA, the TOEFL, all of these processes. Answer your question? Excellent. I think you were next. Yeah.
Morning, my name is Nyamien Delimi Priscille, and I'm come from Ivory Coast. And I will ask my question in French, please. D'accord, j'aimerais savoir quelles étaient les compétences qui vous ont permis d'entrer dans la diplomatie.
So the question is about how do you prepare or how do you, what qualifications do you need to become a diplomat? This is a really interesting question because the qualification in the United States to become a US diplomat is a high school degree. Oh, I bet you didn't expect that. That's it. Now, of course, I have a master's degree in international affairs. Many of my colleagues have master's degrees, bachelor degrees. Many have prior experience in the military, in journalism. But overall, you could come out of high school at 20 years old, and if you pass the test and you pass the interview, then you could become a diplomat. You could be 20 years old with just a high school degree. Now, we're looking for people who have dimensions of, or they have certain qualities, right? So the qualities, we call them precepts, but they're qualities, they're characteristics that people have in order to be successful diplomats. And we evaluate these qualities in the interview as you progress in your career. And you'll find that they are things like communication skills, okay? Languages, not just languages, but also perceptiveness, right? What is somebody saying and what are they not saying? Cultural adaptability, and not just, okay, this is what I wear here, but also maybe I shouldn't invite somebody to lunch during Ramadan, for example, right? That's a very silly example. Your ability to work with others, right? And that means on your own team, right? So there are 13 of these dimensions that we use, but they include things like writing skills. So you need to be very, very well-rounded to be a US diplomat, even if the qualifications on paper aren't as important. And I like this idea because I think it shows you that we're not as concerned about the name. Oh, I went to Harvard. I went to this school. What we're looking for are people who can do the hard work of being a diplomat and representing their country overseas and want to be public servants, right? I think a lot of times people think, ooh, diplomacy, it's parties and it's fancy cars and I'm going to be I'm like a mid-level government bureaucrat, right? Like I do not own a Mercedes. I have a Volkswagen Golf and it got hit on the street. So no, there's a lot of diversity in the State Department. There's also diversity in age. So I started, was 27 when I joined the State Department. So this was my first real career. Maybe I thought I was going to be a teacher, but you can join when you're 22. You can join when you're 32, 42, 52. You can actually join up until you're like 57. And there are people who come in as a second career after being politicians, after being teachers. I'll actually take this opportunity too to maybe just explain a very small bit about the structure of the United States State Department, so our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And specifically the Foreign Service, which are what you would think of as diplomats, right? So our diplomatic corps has, I think, 20,000 diplomats, more or less. And they're split between specialists and generalists. Now, what does this mean? I think when we think of like, what is a diplomat? And my face comes to mind, obviously. We're thinking about people who go and they go to the government office and they shake the hand and they pose for the picture, right? Yes, yes. And they sign very important papers together. And that is one thing that we do. We talk from government to government, and that's very important. But it could also be economic. It could also be cultural, like what I'm doing, right? I'm a diplomat, but instead of talking to the Moroccan government, I'm talking to Moroccan people, right? I do social media. It could also be managing the internal affairs of the embassy. My husband, he's the one who looks at you and goes, "Do you have a cell phone? Did you bring a cell phone in here?" He's the security man, right? So there are specialists, there are doctors, there are English language teachers, there are security professionals, there are IT people, and they're all diplomats. So this is just a little bit of background to know that there's not just one way to do diplomacy, right? It could be government to government, it could be person to government, it could be person to computer, which is most of what it is, right? All computers now. But there's not just one path in, there's not just one path up. There are many ways to do it. I think I saw, there's one over here. Sous?
Bonjour, je
Bonjour.
m'appelle Aziz Boustel, je suis enseignant ici et aussi journaliste. Je voudrais vous poser une question sur la place de l'anglais ici au Maroc. Vous avez constaté très certainement, on va pas poser de questions gênantes, allez, vous avez certainement remarqué qu'il y a une bascule qui va vers le monde anglo-saxon depuis un certain nombre d'années. Et en tant que directrice adjointe donc d'Américaine, si je vois bien, est-ce qu'il y a une politique dédiée pour encourager les jeunes Marocains et jeunes étudiants étrangers francophones qui sont ici à basculer vers l'anglais au niveau tarifaire, au niveau recrutement, au niveau facilité pour étudier, au niveau, tous les niveaux que vous voulez. Est-ce qu'il y a une politique là-dessus? Merci.
Okay. So just to make sure I understand correctly, the question is about, the work that we are doing as the U.S. government to provide opportunities in English language for Moroccans, for Moroccan students, and the general shift of come to America, come to the English side. The dark side? No, the English side. The dark side. No, it's true. So this is la question du moment, right? Like this is like the question of the hour, the question of the time. It's my raison d'être. Like, why am I here today? And why did I choose to speak in English? Well, partially because I'm just much more comfortable. I think it's easy for me to say, since English is my first language, but I do think it's easy to view that English is an international language. Fun fact, English is the most spoken language by non-native speakers in the entire world. So actually Chinese is the most spoken language in the entire world. They have 1 billion people there. It's not hard to do, but English, you know, if you look at like the bar graph of like how many native speakers in English versus how many people speak it as a second language, I think that will show you the importance of English on a global scale. And, you know, His Majesty, the King has, you know, made it clear that Morocco should be a gateway to Africa, right? And if you're going to be the gateway, like if you're the Beb, then you need to be able to interact not just north, but west, east, you know, south. And I think English language is an essential piece of that. So that's why the question earlier about opportunities is important. Now, what do we do specifically for this? I mean, that's most of my job, right? Is to find ways that we can show that, you know, American culture, English language, these are ways that we want to engage and prepare Moroccan and other countries' youth for the future in a way that brings you closer to the United States. Because, you know, I worked in Mexico, and it's right there next to the United States. So Morocco feels that way with Europe a lot of times. We're right. I mean, I drove my car onto a boat and I got to Spain, you know, like it's just there. And so I think part of why I'm here and why we are all here and what we're doing is to go, woohoo, America, over this way. Look, it's just an ocean. You can fly. So that's what we're doing. Did I answer your question entirely? I hope I did. Yeah. I don't have those on me, and I don't know them off the top of my head, which I probably should. But they, you know, I think, and part of the reason that I don't have these is because even we're supportive of the effort to introduce more English. We are pushing more English. We want to be a resource for more English, but it can't just be the United States saying, you should learn more English. Because then is anybody going to go like, oh, thank you for telling me what to do? No, I think we are responding to a desire from Moroccan and Sub-Saharan and all over the world, from youth over the world who watch YouTube, who see films coming out of Hollywood, and they want to be able to communicate through these ways. And so I think, you know, it's part of our job to encourage, and it's part of our job to give resources and opportunities for development. And we do encourage, but we're also responding to what is coming at us, right? Which is that, you know, we want to take advantage of the desire that's already there. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Fouad Amour, I'm not a student, I'm a teacher here. I wish I could be.
We're all students in life.
Yeah, I would like, I have many comments. First of all, I would like to come back to the last question about this debate, language debate in Morocco about French, English, and so on and so forth. As you may know, the former educational policymakers defended bachelor as you know, the term is of paramount importance because it's vehicle a vision of the word. But nowadays we notice that all this will to shift to English is in somehow put aside. Now we are coming back to French as the main second language. And we have noticed that we hear very little about the position of the American, policymakers, or just to which extent you have, how do you appreciate the shifts? It's very important, I think. It's the bachelor, I do believe that the bachelor is very important for our generation, of course, now. But it's pity that all this project is nowadays is not, it's not discussed among policymakers in Morocco. This is my first, and I would like your comment towards that.
Would you like me to comment now
No,
or
no,
wait? Okay.
just if you allow me to finish my comment.
Tfadal.
The second comment is about the American foreign policy. It is well known that this policy oscillated between isolationism, what we call the unilateralism, and the more involvement in world issues, world areas, and so. And we noticed that regarding our region, MENA region, since the what we call pivotal philosophy that has been launched by Miss Clinton under the mandate of Obama. Since then, we have noticed that United States is less and less interested in the region, MENA region per se. And this, of course, gives room to other superpowers like China, Russia, to be more involved in the region. I would like to know to which extent this understanding of foreign policy is reflects the reality or not. The second, the other, and I will finish by that, my last comment is about what's going on nowadays regarding the conflict, Ukrainian-Russian conflicts. We have noticed that now, according to many scholars, this is the onset of a new era in which there is a big change regarding the international order. And we see that when we follow the official discourse, the narrative of China and Russia, and we are now criticizing what we call universal values and many things like that. And we are defending other kind of new order, maybe, and this is, according to many other scholars, this is announcing the decline of United States as the hegemon and the importance, the increasing of the importance of those new superpowers. And there is a project, 1949, for the century birth of Mao revolution, and this thing that this is clear that Russia, China has a purpose, a goal, a clear goal to be the hegemon at this horizon of thought about 1949. To which extent there is a process of decline or not, or just it is a discourse or not? I would like to have your comment and the reaction towards that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lots to unpack, like a big, big present of things. So we'll open it all together. Let's start back. Let me just repeat what the three things are so that we can go back to them. First was English language, the use of English language, the support by the US government for English language, and the bachelor program in general. I'll come back to that one. Second one was, third one was great power politics of Russia, Ukraine. Russia, Ukraine was number 3? What was number 2 again? We'll figure it out. Let's start with great power politics, because I hear that many of you guys are in these programs of international diplomacy, international affairs. So maybe you guys have also just read some of the seminal texts from some of the great international affairs philosophers of our days. And so I don't know if we want to get into a discussion of realism versus constructivism versus I'll have to pull out my like notes from my international affairs degree, but the base of the question here is, as we look to the future as US diplomats or as citizens of an increasingly globalized world, how do we view our world order? How do we see the future of that world order? And particularly when we see states like Russia violating the terms of the world order that was established in the wake of the, horrors of World War II that were supposed to be prevented by the United Nations, the Security Council. So how do we react when we see states violating these norms by, invading sovereign nations? And what effect? So the second question was about U.S. being isolationist versus liberal internationalists in the MENA region specifically. Okay. So, obviously I have opinions as an individual, as a citizen of a global society, and I have the stance of the U.S. government. And I think that the stance of the U.S. government in particular has been very clear with Russia and in invading Ukraine, that they have violated the sovereignty of another state, and that, this is not acceptable in the world order that we want to maintain. And we, as global citizens, I think should feel, very connected to this. But I understand that it can be difficult to maintain that connection in a world where the news cycle is 24/7, where everybody has a curated version of reality in front of them. Maybe you have not heard anything about Russia and Ukraine, I don't know, in the last few weeks, because as it slips into, cold conflict and, and out of the news cycle, then it's, right? They say that it's out of sight, out of mind. And so I think it's easy for conflicts like these, because they're constant and we think that we've risen above them, it's difficult to grapple with them. So, I can say that I can give you plenty of not anecdotes, of evidence of how the United States is attempting to, combat this breaking of our international norms. But, it's incumbent upon all of us to be active citizens in order to, to put into reality the type of world order that we want. Which I think brings into the question of liberal internationalism versus isolationism versus, yes. Do you guys know what these terms are? Here, how about let's do it like teacher style. Somebody give me the definition of isolationism. What's an isolationism? What is isolationism? For foreign policy. Go ahead. Absolutely. So isolationist is, I'm a do me. Like, I'm just gonna care about my stuff. You do you, me, I do me. We're all good, right? Right? That's isolationism. And liberal internationalism, or interventionalism, depending on who you ask. What is this in contrast to isolationism? No, this is wonderful. So liberal internationalism, right, is basically that like we're all connected, right? We're all part of a global community now. So, maybe I do care, what is going on in Côte d'Ivoire. Maybe I do care what goes on in the state government of, Taipei. Maybe I do care what the citizens of Mumbai are talking about. And I think the question was specifically about the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa, and the United States' role in those regions, and generally speaking about like, what's the right point, right? Do you guys have this answer? Like, what is the right point between it's my business, or it's not my business? And I don't think that there's an answer to that, right? There's no right answer to say, this is when you intervene and this is when you don't intervene. I think plenty of people have very strong opinions about our role, and that's where you hear the term global policeman, right? Should there be somebody out there policing the waters, policing the land? Shouldn't we all be standing up about, human rights violations? And I think if you ask, the liberal internationalists, they would say, absolutely, somebody has to speak up. And who is that somebody going to be? Is it going to be the United Nations? And then if you ask, the realists among us who would say, well, there's no, who's giving the power to the state of the United Nations? There is no power because they're not, I think this is the type of discussion that you have in your, in the theory classes about what it means. And I think being on the practical side. So theory, right, that's what you're learning in your classroom, right? When you're talking about what is realism, what is constructivism, what is liberal internationalism, what is isolationism, what are all these definitions? It's just ways of describing the phenomena that you see in international affairs. So when you're there and you're practicing it, it's going to feel very different. And it's going to feel more specific at times. Well, Russia, Ukraine. I mean, I'm just here talking to a group of Moroccans I'm talking to a group of Africans, students, teachers, but it's connected to Ukraine, right? Because we're still the US government and we're part of the international community. So this is why I would encourage you, to get into a place where you can practice the things that we're talking about, right? Like that you can, whether it's working in an NGO, whether it's joining the government to be a diplomat, like if you're concerned about the international affairs, then do something. The last question was about English language, the switch to bachelor's degrees, the importance of English language. Why isn't the United States saying more about switching to bachelor's degrees? And I have two thoughts about this. One, does anybody know about the history of the QWERTY keyboard? You know what the QWERTY keyboard is? The QWERTY keyboard, right? If you look at your keyboard, it's QWERTY, QWERTY. It's a great word, isn't it? QWERTY. That's in English. I think in French there might be a Z up there instead. Azerty. So does anybody know the story of why we still have this keyboard? Really? Okay, so this is a good story. This is a good economic story too. So the QWERTY keyboard was invented with typewriters. Typists on typewriters were typing, and they go tick, 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 and it would go, and it would get stuck, right? Because they were typing too quickly. And so they moved all the letters around so that they would not type too quickly and their machines wouldn't get stuck. It is actually specifically not efficient. Now, why do we still have it if it's so inefficient? What type of keyboard did you learn on? Azerty, QWERTY. How difficult would it be for you now that your mind knows where all of those letters are to switch to a new keyboard? Even if the A's and the E's and the R's and the S's and the letters that you use most were right there at your 2 fingertips and not over here with your pinkies. Pretty difficult, right? Because you know how to work this. This is called a startup cost. It's an economic term for when it's really hard to make a change because the institution is there. And I think this is the perfect story to understand why it's so difficult to switch to a bachelor system, why it's so difficult to switch to English language, right? You did your entire education in French or in one way. And then they said, all right, now, we're gonna change it now. Go, succeed with that new keyboard. You're like, oh, excuse me? I just did 18 years of work on that QWERTY Azerty keyboard, and now this is not fair to me. I'm having a hard time with this because I'm not well equipped for this. And so I think, how do you make a change like that? Do you move one letter at a time? I mean, do you just say, now, rip off the Band-Aid, you all are using the new keyboard now because it's better? I think this type of startup cost is really difficult. And so I think that that's probably one of the reasons why it would be really difficult to change an entire system right away and say, English now, everybody, right? It takes time, and there are institutions that are there that can be difficult to change. And now, why the United States isn't saying more? I mean, I think that this is a question of opinion. And it's a question of, talking about isolationism versus liberal internationalism. I think I said at the beginning, we want people to learn English, not because we're telling them that you should learn English, that we're the best, but we want to be able to respond to people. So I think, there might be a piece of it that is, coming into countries that have histories of colonialism, it's very difficult to make sure that you're not coming off as patronizing, that you're not saying, my way is better because my way is is it the more civilized way? Like was not something that we should say. Is it so I think it can be difficult, and it's a hard line to thread to say, absolutely, we want to encourage this. We think that English language is important. It's a global language. Look at the opportunities that are available when you can use English along with the language you already have. But to say, ours is better, do it like us, that's more difficult. And so I think it's a delicate balance of wanting to support without, being patronizing. So I hope I answered all of your questions. I will pass it on to others.
Je vais poser des questions en français. Je pense que vous les comprendrez très bien. Je parlerai de la diplomatie, donc du partenariat entre les États-Unis et le Maroc, de votre poste de statut de diplomate. Aujourd'hui, comme vous savez, au Maroc, à Marrakech, puisque vous avez parlé de Marrakech, se tient la réunion ministérielle à propos contre Daesh, contre le terrorisme. Il y a la participation entre 80 États et associations. Donc, c'est un événement mondial de la participation du Maroc, du partenariat du Maroc, du renforcement de ce partenariat du Maroc avec les États-Unis pour la lutte contre le terrorisme et surtout par rapport à ce qui se passe dans la région du Sahel, puisque le Daesh se trouve malheureusement un terrain fertile dans cette région. Après l'AQMI, donc Qaïda au Maroc islamique, Ansar Din, tous ces groupements, donc Mouja ou mouvement de l'unicité et du djihad, et le Maroc. Donc voilà un partenariat très important. J'aimerais bien savoir votre avis. Il y a une autre réunion très importante qui concerne nos étudiants juristes à qui je demande de rester. Donc, et aussi ils ont cours. Pour les autres, et qui sont toujours là, c'est sur la réunion sur le crime, c'est-à-dire le blanchiment d'argent. Il y a une réunion en ce moment entre le Maroc et, c'est-à-dire un partenariat avec les États-Unis. Et la troisième question concerne le MCC, le Compact 2, donc c'est la dernière année. Donc, est-ce qu'il va y avoir des perspectives d'avenir comme le FONSID pour la milquisation entre les États-Unis, le département donc, américain, ici au Maroc, et l'État marocain? Donc, c'est trois questions. Donc, la lutte contre Daesh, le terrorisme. La deuxième question, c'est sur le partenariat, c'est-à-dire pour la lutte contre le crime et le blanchiment d'argent, donc le crime financier. Il y a une réunion d'ailleurs en ce moment entre le Maroc et les États-Unis pour renforcer ce partenariat. Et puis la troisième question, par rapport au MCC2, qui nous intéresse aussi pour nos étudiants, puisqu'il y a une possibilité aussi de faire des stages et de travailler sur, que ce soit sur les problématiques juridiques, pour la milquisation et autres. Et est-ce qu'il y a des perspectives pour reconduire à notre Compact 3 ou voilà.
That I don't know about the third compact. This is just, I told you, mid-level here, like way above my pay grade. So here, let me come back here. So 3 questions, right, about the fight against terrorism, about the fight against money laundering, about crimes of, what do we call those? This is corruption, yeah? Financial crime, and then MCC, Compact and Development. And then I'll I get your question. Oh, slowly, okay. What do you mean? Do I talk really fast or something? I don't talk really fast. I don't talk really fast at all. I just get excited and then I want to talk and talk and talk. Okay, I'll try and speak slowly. So 3 questions, or really topics. Well, 3 topics, right? Anti-terrorism, white collar or financial crime, and development. We'll bucket them into 3. Because these are 3 things that are happening now. So first is the de-ISIS ministerial, 80 countries in Marrakesh right now. Our Secretary of State is supposed to go, got the bid. So this question, I think, about combating terrorism is a question that directly relates to what we talked about earlier of our viewpoint, our idea of a global community. And I think that Daesh and the fight against terrorism in general is a good example of why I happen to be somebody who supports more liberal internationalism, somebody who thinks that we are part of a global community. Because I mean, you could look on a map and see Daesh as it, started here, and then it moved here, and then it grew, and then it expanded, and now where is it moving? It's like moving down to where we are, right? Like it's moving down into sub-Saharan Africa. And so, for something like this that is amorphous and it's hard to contain and it's hard to even define, we need to all come together and at the top levels of government to be able to think about how we combat these. Now, the fight against terrorism is a long, enormous topic, and there have been, tomes are very large books, tomes of literature about, about like, how do you define, I took a whole class on terrorism and we barely scratched the surface. What is terrorism? Who is a terrorist? What's a terrorist organization? What does it mean for the definition for international law versus, what you see? And so what I'll do is I'll talk briefly from my job in public diplomacy, right? So not government to government, but government directly to people. One of the programs that we have is it's a grant that we gave to an organization that does hip hop music. And you're like, again, what does this have to do with terrorism? I promise you, right? So the group that has this grant to do work, bringing kids off the streets to do graffiti and hip hop music and dancing, was founded in the same neighborhood that produced the Casablanca bombers, right? Like, this was the neighborhood that produced the radicalization that hit where we are right now. And so, you know, combating terrorism it's multi-level, it's multi-range, but, you know, I think if we're part of a larger conversation about the different faces of terrorism and how you can prevent it, that this sort of multifaceted, many sides, multifaceted approach is the best. So white collar crime, or sorry, corruption in general, last one, and MCC. Let's bucket them together. So, because how many of you have studied international development? Is there a development part of the international affairs major? Have any of you studied anything particular to international development specifically? Yay, no? Only two of you? Okay. Okay, so in my international affairs program, we had different tracks, right? I did strategic studies, which was military stuff, mostly because I don't know, I thought I had done a lot of touchy-feely. Now it was time to do military. International development is a whole nother enormous piece of international affairs, and it comes back to these same questions of like, how much of this is my responsibility, right? Like, how much of this is my responsibility as a Western country, as a rich country, as a country that used to occupy other countries, right? Like, where's the responsibility to uplift others? You know, should we all have a fair playing field? And so I think the question that we're all grappling with, whether it comes to money that's available for development, or whether it's how much focus do we put on the Middle East and North Africa versus Asia versus this, it's a question of scarce resources, right? This is my economics degree talking. There are only so many resources to go around, and usually that resource is time. How much time can I spend on this thing, that thing, this thing, that thing? So, you know, I encourage you all to think about, you know, where it is that you want to spend your time, because there's only a limited piece of it. I think that MCC has done really phenomenal work. I mean, the work that the Millennium Challenge Corporation has done to the TVET centers, those are the technical and vocational education training centers. Like, those are the OFPPT. You guys know OFPPT, right? OFPPT? No? No, that's right. Those centers, right? The giving the vocational education, the MCC has built, I actually don't know the sheet off the top of my head, but you know, those investments are investments in the future. And so I think that what they show is that, you know, the United States, despite having, you know, not unlimited resources, and maybe a government that doesn't always want to put resources overseas, if I'm talking really quickly again, we have a government that has limited resources, right? Every government has limited resources. And we all just went through COVID, recession. I think there is another feeling of wanting to close the doors again. And as a diplomat, my hope is to keep the door open.
Okay, good afternoon to all of you. My name is Noor Mahir, studying political science. It's my first year. And sadly, my question wouldn't be as deep and concentrated as my teachers and the audience in here.
All
But I-
questions are good
okay.
questions.
I would love to ask you a question more on your parkour as a person and how hard was it moving from country to country and getting to adapt and change every time and everything, because I would love to become a diplomat too if that's possible one day. Thank you.
Do you know that there are a lot, I mean, not even a few, a lot of US diplomats that were born in other countries, right? Like you do not need to be born in the United States. You could actually naturalize, right? I was born in Morocco, I moved, I became a citizen, and now I'm a US diplomat. Like that's not my story, although it's my mom. My mom's not American, she's Canadian. The more you know. So my experience moving overseas.
Yeah. The second question would be more about the embassy. Does it take internships, and do you allow us students to have internships in your embassy to learn more about the
Yeah.
culture and everything? And yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I'll answer the second question first about internships at the U.S. Embassy or at the U.S. Consulate General, because we have the embassy in Rabat, the Consulate General in Casablanca, Dar America, which is, the cultural center. It's part of the consulate. And right now, unfortunately, we don't have any local internships. We do have, the State Department overall has an internship program, but that's not specific to Morocco. However, there could be, right? It's not there. It's a possibility. Like in Algiers, where I'm going next, there are 3 interns in my section in public affairs. So there aren't right now, but you could. You're enterprising enough, we can work on this. And I would love to, because, that's another way to invest. So moving from place to place all the time, I'm going to go off the rails for a second and talk to you about neurodiversity. Why neurodiversity? What does this have to do with anything? Y'all, I am really ADHD. Do you know what ADHD is, right?
I am ADHD too.
Yeah. I'm standing because if I sit down, you would see me fidgeting and stuff, right? Because I cannot pay attention to save my life unless I'm interested in something. And things that are new and different, those things are exciting to me. And so I think the State Department, for me, in the way that my wonky, weird brain works, has been a great fit. Because every couple of years when I go, I'm kind of bored, then I have a whole new set of challenges. So it's tough to move from place to place, but I don't need to tell most of you how difficult it is to move to a new country, because I think like 50%, if not more, of the people in this room are far from home, right? Like, y'all already know. I don't need to tell you how difficult it is, but what I can tell you is that I did it like you guys did. I studied in Spain. I studied in Jordan. I was broke. I cannot like hiding suitcases behind me so that they don't charge me for overweight when I move. And this way is better. So you should definitely get a job that pays you to do it. But it's a balance, right? I have 2 kids now. And so this is the first time we're moving when they're going to say goodbye to friends. And I grew up in the suburbs, like it was the same. It looked like the movies, like nothing was different. So my kids will have a very different upbringing than I had. But there are ijabiyat or silbiyat, so there's always pluses and minuses. Par Paris. You go. Yeah. And like, don't all leave, guys. We'll take a nice big selfie at the end, and then I'll let you go. I've been talking for a long time.
J'ai deux questions. La première, c'est aujourd'hui, on voit que le monde est à la porte d'un troisième conflit mondial, troisième guerre mondiale. Et je me poser la question, est-ce que aujourd'hui la diplomatie américaine n'a pas atteint ses limites? Là, ça, c'est la première question. La deuxième question, c'est est-ce qu'aujourd'hui, au vu de la situation qui se passe en Ukraine, le président Biden n'a pas peur d'affronter le président Poutine?
Okay, sorry, I need help with the translation.
Est-ce que le président américain, le président Biden, n'a pas peur ou bien il n'a pas des outils capables d'aller affronter le président Poutine pour apaiser les tensions?
President Biden's scared that what? Putin. Oh, okay. And what was the first question? So, like, are we on the brink of a third world war? Are we on? Okay. So, is President Biden scared of President Putin? That's the question. And are we on the precipice of a third world war? So I have no idea what are the internal workings of President Biden's mind. I don't think anybody does. Nobody could say. I think, the focus should be less on personalities and more on the institutions that we have built to maintain peace and investing in those institutions. Because I think when we focus on personalities, this person, that person, this president, this person, like, you forget that, beneath them are how many real people. It's easy, I think, to get down to people and personalities. Now, are we on the precipice of a third world? Chas v'shalom, God, I hope not. That would be terrible. I don't think anybody in here thinks that would be a good thing. Nobody, we all see the human toll of war. But it really depends, going back to our international affairs theorists here. Are you a realist? Are you this? Or, I think depending on where, there's an expression in English that says where you stand depends on where you sit. You ever heard this? So where you stand depends on where you sit. Now, where you stand means like your position on an issue, right? Am I pro this? Am I anti this? Depends on where you sit. Do you sit in a position of power? Do you sit at the bottom of the totem pole? Do you sit in Congress? Do you sit in a private company? Do you sit? So where you stand, meaning how you feel about different issues, depends on where you sit. Like, what is your perspective? And so I think that, I think all of us should be sitting in a place of doing our utmost to ensure that there is no more war. And I personally happen to think that, the institutions that we built following World War II are probably, hopefully, the best way to avoid that. Yeah, it's more fun than listening to me talk, right? Even when I talk too quickly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I introduce myself. My name is Watar Habib. I'm studying second law. So I have two questions. So actually we're in the crisis between Ukraine and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about so many refugees leave their land and they go for another land? So where they can turn for hope? Those refugees, where they can turn for hope. Mm-hmm. So my second question is about the position of America between this conflict. So what is the position of America in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? Thank you.
Okay. So I think, I hope that it's been clear from what I've said and from things that President Biden has said and others that, this is a war of aggression, right? That that Ukraine was sovereign territory and Russia has invaded when this is against international norms. So, you know, again, the reality and the international law aspects of the different pieces, like we'll leave those aside right now, to say that, you know, clearly we view this as a violation of international norms. Now about refugees, this, I find it very unfortunate that this is a political question. And I think many people would agree that speaking about refugees is politicized today, right? It's difficult to talk about it. My family, my grandfather was a refugee from World War II who came to the United States. So, you know, to me, it's personal, the issue of refugees. And I think that, you know, the unfortunate reality is just, again, the limited resources, whether the resources, time, political will, money, etc., and quite honestly, fear, right? I think there is a lot of fear of you know, unknown, that would make it difficult to, you know, to help as many refugees as one could or should.
Hey, good morning.
This afternoon, guys, y'all, it's like 1:30. Just kidding.
Good morning. My name is Bukar Farouk. I'm studying political science. You talk about terrorism. In your opinion and from your experience, what the best solution to eradicate terrorism in the world?
Yeah, it's a big question. And if I had the answer, then maybe I would be paid more. No, so I think I actually talked about this a little bit earlier, that there's no one right answer, right? Like, but I do feel as a public diplomacy professional, and when I say public diplomacy, I think I've said this a couple of times, what I mean is like government talking to people, right? Not just government to government, not military, but like language, culture, the anthropology of music, right? That, you know, if you ascribe to the definition of terrorism that is like Medusa, you guys know Medusa, right? With the head, and you cut off one head and 7 more grow back, right? Like that the only way to really stop something like that is at the beginning, it's at the source. So I personally, and this is not a policy perspective, but just as a, you know, as a human, think that the, you know, countering disinformation, countering extremist voices starts at a much, much lower grassroots level and on a cultural side, and particularly dealing with inequality, because, you know, it is very unlikely, and it's, I think, very uncommon for somebody who, right, somebody who is doing very, very well for themselves to turn in a direction that is so particularly violent, right? Like, it's not to say it doesn't happen. Of course it does. People have many, psychology is not what I do. But I think that, you know, eliminating the, you know, both the cultural and structural what's the base, you know, like what's the word I'm looking for here? Foundation, thank you, for, you know, terrorist activities, that's most effective.
Okay. I will try in English, but I'm not sure because
I don't care.
Thank you for being here, because it was really interesting for answering the question. And I will just follow the thread and ask 3 questions too, so bear with it. Firstly, I'm interested about like your personal feeling about being a diplomat, like the difficulty you encounter, especially about how to say it, like, because as we know, a diplomat represents their country abroad, And with it, there is like the idea they have to be aware of their action almost every time, like it's like an everyday job. So there is the idea like being a showing you have to be aware of all of your actions. So it can be like a lack of freedom sometimes. So do you share in this sentiment? Do you feel sometimes too constrained by your position as a diplomat, or is not really a big of a deal? That's my first question.
Constrained to being a diplomat. All right, got it.
And like the second question is like one time I met a French diplomat, and he explained me like one of the difficulties he had as a diplomat was the fact he sometimes feel like disconnected from the position and the product of his work, like because he work in a desk and about like a big thematic, he doesn't see like the production of his work. He sometimes feel he doesn't always know if it's if you really help people. And I was like, and I'm interested like if you sometimes feel the same, like lost meaning of what you do, and if it's happened, what you do to keep track, like if it's not waste you too much. And the last question is always about personal feeling. Is like what happened for you when sometimes your position as a person is different from the position of your country? Like, is it something like it's weighs on you, or you can dissociate with it really easy?
Sure. I think, so, okay, the three questions, like, starting from 3, what happens when you feel different than the government, right? Like I'm representing the government, but I'm still a human, so maybe I have a different opinion. The second is what happens, do I ever feel disconnected from, the mission of what I'm ultimately trying to do? And the first is being a diplomat. It sounded a lot like the third question though, like representing your country.
It's more like because you feel like a lack of freedom because of it, because you have to be aware of all your action at all times. So.
Yeah. So I'll go with the first question then, which is, do I feel a lack of freedom from my position? And I would say generally no. I mean, if I feel a lack of freedom, it's probably more connected to the second question about bureaucracy. Right? I have a boss who has a boss, 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 and so on and so forth. And sometimes when I want to do something and I have to ask that person and they say, no, ask that person. And that person says, no, you need to ask that person. And they say, oh, you should probably ask that person. Like, who can tell me if I can do this? Right? Like that, I think, is true in any hierarchical meaning there are hierarchies, there are lots and lots and lots of levels. That will always be the case. Whether you work for ExxonMobil, or if you work for the US government, or if you work for Google, right? Unless you are, President Biden, or I don't know, who's president of Google is Larry Page, right? Whatever. Unless you're that person at the very, very tippy top, and there are not many of those people, you're probably gonna feel at some times disconnected from the larger mission. But, it's just part of being in a big organization. So, but there are trade-offs. If you're in a big organization, like the United States government, you also have a lot of resources at your disposal. And so maybe there are people who work for a small NGO, small non-governmental organization, and they say, I have such huge ideas and I feel so connected, but I only have $3. I need more money, right? So there's trade-offs. But yeah, absolutely. I'm human, right? Like these are complicated things, and there's something that hopefully most diplomats are continuously evaluating, right? I remember in my training class, it's called A100, right? Like you're like, Diplomacy 101, our training class. And they said, where's your red line? I don't know. Where's my red pen? Like, where's your red line? Meaning, like, what would it be? What would be the thing that if your boss came in and said, today you're doing X, you'd be like, nope, I'm out. Right? You need to know that. You need to know what's the thing. And I think especially, again, my grandfather was a refugee in World War II. And he made it to the United States because somebody gave him a visa, right? That's a big decision. So you need to know when you're getting in, where is that line for you? And I think one of the things that to recognize is when you're part of the big organization that the higher you go, the closer you're probably going to get to your lines. Because the higher you go, you have more responsibility, you have more power to affect change. And so it's more likely that somebody from a different background or whether it's a different organization, a different party, whatever, is going to say, this is the policy. And you can go, no, 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 no. And they go, that's the policy. And you have to follow. So, keep that in mind when you're like, I'm going to be a diplomat. I'm going to have a Mercedes, but I have no independent freedom. No, not really. You guys, we're all still human. Are you guys really still interested in asking questions? I mean, listen, I have plenty of time, but
Okay. So, good evening.
Yeah, good afternoon. Firstly, yeah.
Should we do a final roundup of questions and then take a selfie together? Yeah, all right. Final roundup.
Okay, good afternoon. I have 3 questions, please. And my first question is, the United States are a democratic country. And, the United States are a democratic country, and this country claims to defend the human rights in the world. And it's normal, but when some countries like China, like Russia, abuse to human rights of these people, and the United States condemn this, and it's normal. But when it comes the human rights in some countries like Central Africa, like the countries of Arabian Peninsula, the United States close the eyes when we say in French. And why this difference? Why?
We say turn a blind eye. That's the expression.
Okay. Why this difference? And in French we say deux poids deux mesures. Why this?
Yeah.
Deux poids deux.
Double standards.
Okay. And my second question is the situation in Ukraine is horrible, but in Yemen, but Yemen is in war since 2015, and your country don't condemn like we want the war in Yemen, but I don't know the difference in the treatment of the war in Ukraine and Yemen. I want to know this difference, this difference by the United States in the situation in Yemen and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, my last question, I want to know the influence of the arms industry in the White House and in the State Department in United States. The influence of the arms industry.
The arms industry, like the military-industrial complex and how it affects the State Department versus the... Okay, let's get all the questions. Wrap up of questions. So I got 3 questions. I'm going to remember all of them.
Good evening. So my question will be very similar to the question Jamal asked earlier. And I heard that you were a diplomat in Mexico. I want to know how your experience in Mexico was different from being a diplomat in Morocco. And thank you.
Gosh, don't you just want to start with that question, the easy one? No, I'll leave it for last because it'll be a nice wrap up. Okay, so 3 very tough questions about policy, right? What's the difference between war in Ukraine and war in Yemen? What's the role of the military industrial complex in the State Department, in the White House? And the first question was about double standards in general. That's right, human rights. Okay, so human rights, war in Yemen versus war in Ukraine, and military-industrial complex. So clearly, lots of intertwining, interconnected themes, right? And the main heart of this theme is, the military aspect, right? We're talking about wars, we're talking about the use of force, we're talking about human rights. And I think, there's the academic answer and there's the, policy answer. So the academic answer is to come back again to your worldview, right? Are you a realist, right? If you're a realist, then you look at these conflicts and you go, well, this place has these resources and that place has these resources. Don't have to look further. If you look at a policy answer, you might say, well, sure, resources are important, but also there are people who care in all of these places, in all of these governments that are doing their best to try and support policies that make lives better for these people. The same question for double standards on human rights. The academic answer, depending on your particular, theorist, will be most likely something along the lines of, the great power competition and how much power Central African Republic has versus Russia versus China, and therefore the relative importance in the global order. And if we have scarce resources of time, then this is why you don't get as much attention on particular human rights issues. You could also look at the discussion we had earlier about global policemen. Are we supposed to be enforcing all of the rules? Is it the job of the United States? Is it the job of the United Nations? Is it nobody's job? Is it domestic? When is this an internal affair and was this an extra? These are not simple questions, and there are no simple answers but I think what I want you all to take away from this chat today, from this sort of discussion, is that there are people behind the institutions, right? Institutions don't exist by themselves. Like they are self-perpetuating in a lot of ways, but there are people who make those things go. And so as you continue to study and ask these questions and look at these things, you should keep wondering, at what point was this individual choice? And at what point is there a structural problem that makes it so that even the best individual, the most altruistic, right? The one who has the purest heart, when you just open it up and it's bleeding and they want to help absolutely everybody, but the structure is not there to make it happen. So I think that's really what I want you to take away, is that we work as individuals recognizing that there are certain structures that are either historical, that we're going to have to change, and that those, like the QWERTY keyboard, do not change quickly. And then the last question, which is much more fun, is about being a Mexican diplomat, not Mexican, a US diplomat in Mexico. I want to tell one more story, because this is a dumb story, but I think it's really amusing. There was a Secretary of State, which Secretary of State would be? Anyway, a United States Secretary of State, right? The foreign minister of the United States. And he would bring in new ambassadors, right? So like, look at me, I'm going to be ambassador to Morocco. I'm going to be ambassador to Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Central African Republic. And he would say, come into my office. We would walk in and he would bring them over to a globe. Yeah. And he would go, point to your country. And they would go, oh, okay. And they would like spin it around and they would point to Cameroon and they would point to Morocco, or they would point to this. And he would go, no. And he would turn it and he would go and he would point to the United States, and you say, this is your country. Don't forget it. So, you know, the experience that you have in each place is really unique, right? There's nothing like, you know, Mexico and Morocco, despite having very similar economies in a lot of ways, and a lot, you know, like just being the country next to the northern neighbor, there's a lot there to unpack. You know, the jobs that I did were so different in each of those places. Here, I do public diplomacy. There, I did visas. I mean, 30,000 visas I did every day. ¿A dónde quieres viajar? ¿Por qué quieres ir a Estados Unidos? ¿Vas a visitar a vos amigos? You know, it's very different. So, but throughout the process, it's just been a growth of learning how to continue to connect back to the United States and seeing how, you know, my experience as an American growing up in the United States can hopefully help us be part of a like integrated global community that will, you know, prevent, God forbid, World War III from coming. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. Thank you. Je remercie l'assistance, je remercie les professeurs, je remercie notre ami, notre professeur Courtney, qui excelle avec nous dans l'enseignement. J'ai entendu que vous voulez de passer de la diplomatie à l'enseignement, n'est-ce pas? Vous êtes essayé aujourd'hui. Donc, nous sommes très heureux de vous avoir accueillis. Nous vous remercions. Et aussi, bon, je demanderai pour les étudiants s'ils peuvent prendre des photos. Vous voulez prendre des photos ensemble. Comme ça, on fait la diversité. Nous avons presque 15 pays ici donc représentés. Et c'est un plaisir que le monde, dans la diplomatie, c'est la rencontre, c'est la paix aussi. Donc, c'est le partage. Et je vous remercie une autre fois.